everybody. Welcome to Hustle with Aloha. I'm Alicia Nagel with Alicia Nagel Creative, and I'm super stoked to have Boyega Ajayi here with me today. We met in a mastermind group led by Rich Hall, and he is a business advisor. And we started talking about the value of branding and business valuation and had way too much fun and decided that we should touch on this topic for entrepreneurs and small businesses for the benefit of all. So, Boyega, amazing to have you. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Good morning, Alicia. Thanks for having me on your show this morning. Yes, my name is Boyega. I'm the founder and CEO of Bolton Advisory Group. We're an advisory firm, and I work with business owners to build transferable value in their business and get ready for and exit their business on their own terms. Now, that can take many different directions, whether it's succession planning, whether they're trying to sell their business, or whether they're just trying to build a valuable business.
That's awesome. And I love it that you are interested in not just the tangible aspect of what a business has to offer in terms of its value, but you're also interested in intangible things, people power, brand equity, stuff like that. What made you start to look into this and get interested in it?
So yes, I'll give you a brief background. At my previous experience, I have a lot of M&A, strategy consultation, financial analysis background. Just for a fun fact, actually an engineer and an
Right.
MBA. But I'll say one thing. At my last job, when I started realizing the power of just branding to be specific was I used to manage a proposal development team and we used to write proposals. And I used to work with our marketing executive. And then we realized like one of the ways we communicated our story was not just having technical reports, which everybody else was doing, but having pretty pictures. So I used to tell our team is like, we need pretty pictures. We
Yeah.
need graphs. If we're doing an Excel model, which is for a power plant, it's like, let's still make it engaging. Let's make it pop, as you'll say. So just
Yeah.
pretty pictures and then create a slide deck. We'll still have the 100 page, at times 500 pages report, but it's like, hey,
Long.
let's let's have a great slide deck, communicate clearly what we're doing, the benefits, the numbers. So that's how I just always had that in my back of the mind. And if you ask any of the engineers that worked with me, they always say, I always saw them pretty pictures. Now, after I started my company, I got there's an institute called the Exit Planning Institute, and they have like I'm called a CEPA, and they have some frameworks and methodologies. But one of the things that really interested me, they had a framework about intangible elements and their role in value creation. And these intangible elements were human capital, customer capital, social capital, and structural capital. And for some reason, I just really took an interest in it. And I said, everybody kind of gets it on a high level, what these things are. But then I said, I'm an engineer. So it's like, how do I really dig into this and understand how
Yeah.
it's related to value?
Right.
So I
I
probably
love
spent the
that.
last
Like a
three, four
concept to a
years.
dollar sign. That's amazing.
Yeah, I spent the last 3, 4 years researching it. And I actually, like an engineer, I had like a value equation, like, okay, EBITDA, I'm a value, as you know, I don't know if your business owners know this, but the standard for measuring value is EBITDA times the multiple. And then I was like, okay, how do these things actually relate to value and value creation? Now, the EPI didn't tell you that. And I talked to a lot of people who have been in the industries, and everybody was just like revenue, like income. And but I was like, okay, that sounds good, but that's not really what's going on. So I just started digging in, researching, and looking at my past experience, and I just tried to come up with a way to explain to it in plain English, not not
Yeah.
business jargon to people what how intangible elements can create value.
I love that. And hey, actually, speaking of normal people language, would you mind explaining what MMA is? It's not
Oh,
the mixed martial arts, is it?
no, definitely not. That's MMA. So M&A is mergers and acquisitions. It's
Oh, MMA.
when you're selling or buying a business. It's just deal making. You have business brokers, investment bankers,
Gotcha. So they
M&A firms, attorneys, tax attorneys, CPAs, all involved in the process of buying and selling.
gotcha. And then EBITDA is, I know it's like a factor that has to do with like, I guess maybe I shouldn't even try to define it. Would you mind trying to?
Actually, you're going to get me on the spot. So I'm not going to get the right abbreviation right, but it's earnings before income, tax, and depreciation, something like that. But basically, it's a normalization. So, for example, imagine in like Florida and I'm in California, we have different state taxes,
Hmm.
we have different local taxes. So you can look at just net income or profit because it's different. Now, you don't want to look at revenue because different companies might have different ways, their cost of goods and things like that. So that EBITDA is the metric to compare
Ah,
companies in this, like a unit way of comparing companies, kind of like maybe in branding, you might have a customer satisfaction survey from a scale of 1 to 10. This normalizes it and you can compare.
gotcha. I've heard of EBITDA in relation to like commercial real estate where like what is the cost of like maintaining the land and like the materials and like how volatile is the market and like keeping tenants in it and stuff like that. And certain types of real estate have like a more favorable EBITDA just because by the nature of the type of
Yes,
property.
I say EBITDA is, and it all comes from the income statement. So it's just a line item. It's before the net income or the profit of a company. I guess they just say the amount a company is earning, but obviously we have to pay taxes and then we have to pay depreciation. And that can vary depending on the unique circumstances of a business, the business owner's credit. So you just add back your taxes and your depreciation and you get the EBITDA.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. I really appreciate going through that. Um, Earlier you had shared some of your thoughts with me on the different aspects of the value of branding and how you see that not just from like a marketing standpoint, but from like a business strategy and like a financial standpoint. Would you mind if we shifted the conversation back towards that after you indulged me by defining EBITDA?
Definitely. So I'll say going back to the EBITDA formula, the second part I mentioned, which is actually more important, is the multiple. So the
Mm,
multiple is kind of like a factor where the capital, not to get too technical, but the capital market, like investors, people who buy businesses, like you need a rule of thumb on how much a company is worth. So over time, people look at companies to value them, and they came up with like averages, like okay, maybe for a construction company, they value them at 3 to 5 times earning. For a manufacturing company, 2 to 3 times. For a restaurant, it's like 1 to maybe 3 times earning. So just like a rule of thumb, but each company is unique. So the multiple is where you really create value. But now the question is, how do you create, what's the range of value? So let's use the easiest example, like restaurants. Some restaurants, let's say a fancy sushi restaurant that creates an engaging atmosphere, ambience. Obviously, they have a higher range versus a hole in the wall, which might have better
right.
food. But how do you actually look at what gives that business value and quantify it? So that's where intangible elements, which I mentioned, like human capital, social capital, customer capital, and structural capital come in. And I believe branding plays a key role. So how can branding help that restaurant? First of all, for the name, the ambience, the look and feel. Obviously, the food should be good. That's a separate thought.
Right,
But
right.
let's say everything else being equal, the branding, that look and feel, how you how you captivate the audience your customers as they walk into the restaurant, the smell, the
Mm,
ambient, the music you're playing in the background. I mean,
yeah.
I can see your look, you're going back to your favorite restaurant, but it's those little things. And as you and I were talking, is sometimes it can happen by chance. Like if you have a really creative person, they know
Mm,
what to do. But at the same time, as a business, you have to be intentional with how you're making your customer experience. I don't want to talk about. I think value should be, it should be in your mind, but it shouldn't be like you're driving like, oh, I want to create value here. I want to
right,
create value. It's like create a great experience,
right. Because
customer
people don't go to
experience.
restaurants because it's cost effective, right?
Yes.
They go for an
No,
experience. The
I mean
reason
you
you
can
saw
do
me,
that too. Like your supply chain. We can have that. I'll have that with the CP. I'll have that
Especially
conversation
not sushi. Good Lord.
with
That's
the CPA and stuff. But I think the first thing is your customer um ambience and stuff. I know the funny thing, for the most part, it's been true. I always tell myself I can tell which restaurant is really good by looking at the signage outside. And the reason why I say that is just
I
a
love that.
creative owner. You can tell a business that is run by a creative who is really focused on creating an experience and somebody who's just like, hey, let me invest in this and I'll get it. And I always say, like, just the way the signage, the way they do the valley and stuff, that means that person has been intentional. And I
Right.
said, if somebody is that intentional, they're gonna have hired the best chef, they're gonna have tasted the food, they're gonna have sourced quality material. So you can always tell by that first experience who is really intentional about
Love
creating a
that.
great customer experience.
It's so funny that you use this example because early in my career, when I first started doing branding, I worked at a multidisciplinary design firm in LA, actually.
Oh,
Um,
right.
and I helped there were some real estate investment like moguls who decided that they wanted to invest in a sushi restaurant, Sushi and Robata, and open it in Manhattan Beach. And I mean, these guys were really shrewd business people, intelligent, right? They knew the market in terms of like real estate, but they didn't know anything about restaurants. And they hired myself and the firm that I was with at the time to do some branding, and they put like what is now known as a brand book. This was a long time ago. I think this was like in 2005, maybe, in their private placement memorandum. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to be investing in a sushi restaurant, it's not because you're going to make money. It's because you want it to be, you want to look cool and like invite your friends to it. And so they had this private placement memorandum with like, oh, we're going to spend this much money on the build out. And it was like a luxurious place. So I'm sure the numbers weren't favorable, but they got funding earlier than expected because of our brand
Right.
book that was at the beginning of it, because we were able to like paint the picture of what this place is going to be and get people excited. And then, of course, like you said, there was the gazillion number charts and stuff behind it. But
And I'm
it
sure
was
you
funny that
also
you
made
picked
the
that
book.
example.
I'm sure you also made the book engaging and easy to
Oh yeah.
read.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
not
Oh yeah, it was super designed. Like all of the number charts were beautiful with the font and the logos on every page and
pretty cells, pretty pictures. Now always have substance behind you.
yeah, behind it.
If you
Yeah.
have if you have substance, pretty cells.
I always say in my branding talks, I remind people that there are so many studies out there that show that as customers, consumers, we make the decision to buy something with our mind, or excuse me, with our emotions and our heart. So we're like already emotionally invested in buying the thing. And then our brain like looks for facts and ways to justify making the purchase. And so you need both. But the thing that starts the conversation is engaging the emotions and the heart.
Yes.
So you mentioned people capital, social capital, structural capital.
Human capital, social capital, structural capital, and customer capital. And if you indulge me for a second, I'll go through that and I'll explain how branding fits in. So, human capital is just your talent. Imagine your staff, your management team, and how you get the best out of them. So, obviously, that's the domain of HR officials. We're talking about how you want the smartest, hardworking, you want good employees, you want employees who like coming to work, who
Right.
stay
And
with
part of
you
that is
for a while.
attracting them, right?
Yes,
You have to be appealing.
definitely. So there's a whole way you look at human capital and how you build value. I think everybody understands that. Then the second one is structural capital. It's like your infrastructure. Do you have patents, copyrights? But
Mhm.
not that. Do you have process? Do you have the best computer system in a place like a kitchen, a restaurant? Maybe their ordering system, the point of sales. I'm not a big fan of this. I think it loses the human element. But in some restaurants now, they have the menus on the dining table, and you can
Yeah, you're
order
like,
and
"Doot,
pay
doot, doot."
without stuff. So, I mean, that's structural capital, but I don't think it's a good idea for a restaurant.
Yeah.
Um, the third element is like social capital. That's kind of like your reputation in the marketplace, your leadership. Think of things like PR, and
Yeah.
then the last one is customer capital, which is where you start thinking branding, which is the relation you have with customers, the way they feel about you, the way they're
Mhm.
captivated by your story. How do you tell your story? There's some also practical things like having a CRM, having your website, how you get their attention. I'm sure you can tell people how you work with businesses to build a captivating and engaging website. But customer capital encapsulates all those things. And branding is a key activity because branding, I said it's very intangible. You can't picture it, but for example, when you go on a website, the imagery, it's
Yeah.
like, are you seeing somebody like, ah? Imagine if you went to a sushi restaurant and you have
Right.
people jumping like this. Let's say your company versus, let's say for the company, I don't know what kind of imagery. Do you have somebody looking in, savoring their drink, their
Right.
sake, enjoying their food? That's branding. So how do you use branding to communicate value? And it has many different ways it manifests in values. Like with the proper branding, you can probably increase your price. It sounds, I know Sushi Rapata Bar in Manhattan Beach is not expensive, so the experience, but if they didn't have a good brand, just from the way they probably have like those thick menus and things
Oh
like
yeah.
that. But
It was
those little,
gorgeous. They
yeah,
didn't
those
survive
little
COVID,
things,
but it was a nice restaurant. Yeah.
yeah, they allow you to charge a premium. And not only that, if you think of restaurants like, I don't know why we're going to a restaurant, but let's stick with restaurants.
Well, I
And
think it's great because everybody wants to go to it. People want to invest in it, and they're his like stereotypically they don't make money. It's like what,
yeah,
like 2 years before they're break even? Is that the average?
yeah, I'm not a restaurant expert, but I used to dine out before I started my business when I was a high salary. I used to dine out and go to all those sushi bars and stuff in Santa
Those were the
Monica.
days. I feel you.
But like after COVID, I've kind of stay at home a little bit more. But
Me too.
even I'll say like, yes, now obviously restaurants like McDonald's and stuff, they're on a different spectrum, but
That's
they're actually
different.
pretty
Yeah.
valuable. But let's talk about the high-end sushi restaurant. Let's say like Nobu.
Yeah.
Now, how do you, obviously they have a good brand and a good, they're very valuable. Now, are they bringing money? I don't know their financials, but I'll say, for example, let's say your hotel, let's say you're opening a new W hotel, obviously you can attach that Nobu
Right.
to your hotel and that brings value. So
Value without even
yeah, you might
putting.
not always be able to monetize value. That I said, I help business owners build transferable value where
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
monetize. So a sushi robata bar is obviously one of the harder things, but you said there's brand equity, there's satisfaction, bringing in your friends and colleagues and saying this is something I built. So that's that part. But the actual strategies, I said, like a Nobu working with, you can, I'm sure they get fees from being
Licensing or
invested.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can see a W hotel just like people might stay at the hotel just because Nobu is
Sure.
there.
And
So,
if you're familiar with, like, you see the strategy in LA and Vegas, like most of the great restaurants and stuff in Vegas are actually started in LA or New York. Now, those
right.
restaurants might not make that much money in LA, but after they build up their brand, their value and stuff in a
Right.
place like LA, then they take it to monetize in a place like Vegas or Miami. Now, not everybody executes it properly. They end up diluting their brand. So
Yeah.
that's a whole different ball game. But yes, just understanding that from a creative perspective and a business that there is power in intangibles and you have to have intentional strategies for building that value and then you have to have a separate like how am I going to monetize it and obviously um the key part of value is revenue. It's like how are you going to build revenue in the future? It doesn't have to be now, it can be in the not too distant future,
As long
but
as you're
you're
profitable enough to keep your doors open until you get to that point, right?
yep,
You know,
which is a
who
challenge.
when you mentioned Vegas and LA and New York, I thought of Wolfgang Puck. Talk about a name that like started out and then I mean I think he has like pasta sauce now that you can buy in the supermarket. And even in restaurants they have like the little kiosk Wolfgang Puck. I mean, arguable whether or not he diluted his brand too
Yeah,
far.
brand extension, but yeah, I think that's and I said I'm the business advisor. I understand branding, but I don't want to be
Fair
the
enough.
brand echo.
Yeah.
But no, let's go into it. But if you think about it, he started in LA. I think he had his birth. Obviously, he's from Europe, so I don't know what he did in Europe. But in America, he had the restaurants in Beverly Hills. Celebrities came in, and from there, he built that value. And I said, probably as you said, that restaurant itself probably wasn't profitable, but the fact that he had such a good brand and a good intangible element is
Yeah.
he was able to use it to do the brand extensions, cooking products online. I think he has a cookbook. I don't
Yeah.
know if he did. Did he ever do a TV show? I don't know
If
if he
he
did a TV.
hasn't, he's probably going to.
Yeah, I know other guys, but he laid the pathway. I think he was the first one for that whole idea of a celebrity chef.
Yeah.
I remember hearing. I don't know. I mean, I'm
Been
45,
around
but
for a long time. I don't
yeah, I
even.
remember when I first came to LA as a teenager, Wolfgang Park, you used to see people like Sylvester Stallone and everybody else going to his
Yeah.
restaurant in LA. So he definitely had that brand and he led to value. And I think he was able to monetize it. And I'm sure
Yeah.
hopefully he's invested in the original restaurant. They had a contract that, hey, whatever you
Yeah.
build out of it, we get a piece of
Hopefully.
we get a piece of everything, not just the restaurant.
Right, the empire. Sorry, I'm having too much fun talking to you about everything, so I'm kind of leading us astray from what we originally
No,
had.
no, I said, and I guess to the audience, I love writing. So I wrote a white paper. I'll polish it, make sure there's no copyright, and we'll issue it to everybody so they can read. So let's have
That
fun.
would be
Fun on the high
awesome.
level. We share the details with everybody.
I love that. It's interesting. A lot of your examples in that white paper, which I loved reading, by the way, are so different from restaurants. They're
Yes,
electronics, which I think like honestly before Apple. Electronics weren't like sexy. You had like Panasonic and like Nokia. They were all black, and it was mostly about like what the features were and how cheap it was. But Apple changed everything. So
yes.
let's talk a little bit about that.
So I think one of the things I told you after I was always fascinated. It's funny. I'm a full disclaimer. I'm an Android person.
I had
Um,
Android too, and I did love it, but I switched over to the dark side. I'm Apple now too.
like I had switched between Apple and Android, but I said I'm an engineer. So I had the Apple, I think the iPhone too, but I I was using Napster and I couldn't upload my music file. So I
I
was like, damn,
forgot about Napster. That's awesome.
like how dare they control like an update? So I switched to Android, but then I just always admired Steve Jobs and what
Yeah.
he did. And I read a lot about him and he actually informed me. I think one of the key things he talked about benefits, not features. So I
Yes.
think he was the first person to establish that. I think now everybody else is catching on, but
Mhm.
he really laid the groundwork for intangible elements, like from the way they design their stores to their ads to their equipment, like the idea of just opening your product and it's working,
Mm.
to how the sale
Mm.
experience
Yeah.
in the store. So I talk about in the white paper like pre-sale, during sale, post-sale. So imagine pre-sale you see the Apple ads. I believe I haven't been on their website recently, but I believe you can go on their website. You can get great information about a product, and it's not like the 10, 20 page spec. It's summarized neatly on their website.
Right.
You can I don't know if you can buy. I guess you can buy online, but you go into their store.
It's an
What
experience.
what do they call that staff again?
Like a Genius bar or something.
Just the people, the way you walk in, they're super chill. They walk you in, the way the display.
Young. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun and
Like
it's fun and
hip
thinking. I said
nerd.
it's not scary. It's a great
Mm-mm.
atmosphere.
It's
And I said
true.
he was intentional. I know I remember reading about it. Steve Jobs hired the CEO of a famous brand, a clothing or luxury retail chain in Europe to come be the head of stores and retail.
Huh.
And
That's
they were
interesting.
very yeah, they were very, very intentional. And then even after you buy the product, they also go to the post sale is their customer service. As you said, you can come back and hang out at their Genius bar and have them fix it. It's a whole experience. And in a previous presentation, I hate to do this, but I compared like Apple to a Verizon store and the experience
Enough
like
said. Like that's all you need to say. Apple doesn't even have a register. They walk
Yeah,
around with one of those things that you can swipe or whatever.
yeah, like, and I said, I think that they have great structural capital. Now, that kind of technology works well in an Apple store. It might not work well in a restaurant. So that's why you need advisors like business
Yeah.
business owners. You're so focused on many things. You
Yeah.
need like a high level advisor that either advising you with strategy, brand, and just looking at that
Market
customer
research.
experience and
Yeah.
creating value. But yeah, so these are the different ways. And I said branding. So looking at it before your customers come to you, while you're engaging with your customers, and after your customers. That's one way branding brings value. The second thing to consider is what's your strategy? So obviously, if you're to raise the perceived value from your customers' eye. So going back to the sushi, now not all sushi is the same, but depending on where you're sourcing it, but the way you present it, the
Mm,
way you display it, like is your chef knowledgeable? Do you have a authentic sushi chef from Japan, or is it a guy from LA making your
right.
sushi? Those things can, I'm assuming like a lot of, I don't know if people have been to a lot of the sushi restaurants, they actually bring staff from Japan. There's a special visa
Wow.
program. So that can make your feel authentic. And with
Mhm.
that said, you're not charging $10 a sushi roll. You can charge
Right.
25. So it gives you a competitive advantage. Versus if you're trying to be the most efficient, let's say like a McDonald's strategy. They
Right.
do some branding activity to differentiate them from Burger King, but they're more focused on being the low cost, and
Yeah.
um they
I
just
have this theory that McDonald's is not actually selling food, they're selling convenience. Like their tagline about I'm loving it, in my mind, that's like the mom with the kids in the back that are screaming. She's got a million things going on and she's like, "Oh my God, I only have like 20 minutes. I need to feed everybody and I only have like 30 bucks." And she goes to McDonald's and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm loving it." Like to me,
no,
that's
and that's a good
saying that, not like, yummy, I'm loving it. It's like, oh,
yeah,
it's so convenient.
and that's a great point you bring. I think I don't know if you have do you have Carl Juniors in
In
Florida?
Florida, maybe. I don't know. I don't eat fast food.
Yeah, I
Probably.
don't, but I remember like 10, 20 years ago, some of the fast food restaurants were trying to make their products like a luxury item. So Carl Jr.'s, they were trying to make their $7. I remember they were having people like Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian,
I remember
and
that was like an Angus burger or something, and some
yeah,
kind
but
of
I was just like, yes. I mean, I just looked at it. I mean, I actually did go buy one of the burgers, but then it was still the same thing. I'm like, what is this? And I said, obviously, in a place like California, we have so many great burgers then. So to
yeah,
me,
you
that didn't
do.
work. But I don't eat fast food, but I think they've moved away from that whole idea of luxury, and they know their lane. Like, hey, we're not trying to premium.
That
We're
was an
more like,
expensive lesson, I'm sure. I'm sure Paris
yeah.
Hilton wasn't cheap.
Definitely. But as you said, that convenient, which is also a form of branding, but it's not like the luxury or elevating the value you
Right. It's not a
build.
sushi chef from Japan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a different type of brand strategy. And there's nothing wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
McDonald's are the most profitable restaurants to own. I
I
think the
believe that.
franchise, like
Yeah. It's
an
the
average,
structural capital that you were talking about, the boop, 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 and like the the machine, right?
yeah,
That
get it. And I
makes
said, and just to your who might be listening, obviously we're talking about some industries that have been well studied, like that
yeah,
you
yeah.
studied that in college. So restaurants and manufacturing, but let's say you're a realtor company or commercial HVAC, there's still certain things you can do along those lines. They're not as well studied as
Yeah.
restaurants,
I,
and you
you
can
know,
work with experts.
Restaurants can be small. One of my clients is a pizza restaurant in Hawaii. They have several locations
Uh,
across the islands, and he has invested in his brand. Well, first of all, he's working with me, so he understands the value of branding, and he's created like characters, and he's got like cheeky sayings, and like the pizza boxes, we've turned them into like basically walking billboards. They're very unique looking, and so when someone's leaving
uh,
with their pizza box, everyone who sees them knows that
nice.
it's from there. So I do think that, even small businesses that invest in branding can really reap the benefits. And he started out with just one location, but as he's grown, he has invested in that structural capital. He's like a point of sale system. I think he uses Toast or something like that to integrate with the website for online ordering. But
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So yes, no, I said branding is definitely one thing you should do. But again, one thing I'll tell caution everybody is don't just do the fad of the month. Like
right.
I just said kind of the Carl's Jr. It's like, are you really differentiated? Don't have just a blah blah product. I'm assuming your owner, the gentleman in, I'm sure he focused on great food too. It's
He
like,
did. It's
is it
delicious. The
different?
pizza's amazing. Yeah.
Is it differentiated? I mean, there's nothing more frustrating when somebody comes up with a good brand commercial and everything, and then you go try it and it's disappointing. Actually, you
Right.
can lose. I think you can lose a customer for life. Like I think they won't give
I think
you
so too. I mean, you
a
just
second.
mentioned Carl's Jr. You didn't say it was bad, but you were like, well, it's the same thing it's always been. It's not
Yeah,
elevated.
but
Yeah.
I think like McDonald's, I guess I don't know if I should say truth in marketing and branding, but I know what to expect from McDonald's when I go there. But if a restaurant like tells you they're fancy sushi restaurant,
Yeah.
but then you go there and maybe they look good on the outside, but on the inside, the ambience is like a McDonald's.
You
And
feel
then
betrayed, right?
yeah, so now if they tell you they were a low cost sushi restaurant, and I hey get your sushi in 5 minutes now. Whether that's a good idea, that's a separate story. But there's a little bit truth. But you want it to be differentiated. You want it to speak to your core product. There
Yeah.
should be a value, and then you want it to be
Yeah.
sustainable over the long run.
Right. Because that if you raise your expectations too high and then you have a good reputation and then you fall, like, you fly too close to the sun and you can't maintain it and then you fall, then people will skewer you. The public is ruthless. When a company is trying to say they're one thing and then the customer is perceiving them as something else, they call that a brand gap. Like there's a gap between what they're saying and what they're doing. And so one of the things I teach is that the goal is to have those aligned. So you're kind of like managing expectations and then delivering. So if you make a brand promise, you need to deliver on it. And part of that brand promise is it high-end sushi or is it $10 sushi? And then
No,
as long
great.
as you do what you say you're going to do, you inspire trust and confidence in your customer. And then it builds up that brand relationship.
Another good example is Amazon. So if you're looking at Amazon,
Oh,
some of the most
yeah.
valuable companies are Amazon and Apple. So Apple is their brand promise, innovative, hip. They speak to your brain sexiness and stuff. Now, um, Amazon is more like the dad, like cost effective and stuff, but they also have a great brand. They're trusted. I think Jeff Bezos, at the same time, um, Steve Jobs was talking about innovation and stuff. Bezos was talking about bringing immense value to customers. It's like Amazon Prime, 2 day shipping, a well easy to read. Like just go look at the Amazon website and the Apple website. To two totally
Completely
different,
different. Yeah.
but still both effective.
Yes.
And Amazon is like its relevance is differentiated. Like you can get anything you want 2 days. You can find it. You can find stuff. Now they don't try to show you flashy $10,000 watches that are not relevant to you
Right.
and stuff. They
Yeah.
stick.
That's
They understand
interesting.
you. They stick to you, so they're differentiated and sustainable.
There's
So Amazon
selling.
works. Now somebody like Ferrari, like they're very well branded. They're a great product, but they're not relevant to most people's lives every day. It's not something you think
Right.
about. It's only a select market. So that's why you have to don't try and do branding on your own. Consult with experts who understand branding. I happen to know a branding expert. I can't remember her name, but I think she's called Alicia.
Good job.
But
Good
check.
job. Yes. Yes.
So that's one concept. Let me just look at my notes. Another thing I want to mention. Yeah, I think those are some key concepts to understand about the value of brand. It's like it can differentiate you in the marketplace. It
Hmm.
can bring customer value, but just from a business now, we've talked about customers, but let's shift our focus to the business owners who our client is why why branding is important. I'll take two key concepts. I'll begin and I'll let you end as a
Okay.
question. So this value is important. Don't just think in terms of revenue, like how much money I make. Obviously, you want to be profitable, but you want to think about the long-term value of your business. What strategies and activities are you making to build value in your business? And I said a framework to consider is like, is it the human capital, the value of your team? Is it your structural capital, like the computer systems, the patents you have? Is it your social capital, like what you're doing in the community? What networks, what alliances and stuff are you building? Or at some stage, the customer is always the most customer is king. Is it your customer capital? And I think for most, I can't think of any industry where the customer is not relevant, maybe except government or stuff. But for
The
most,
DMV.
yeah, the DMV, it's like you get to, but for most industries and constantly, your customer is important and is not only obviously everybody gets that and you do
Mhm.
activities, but be really intentional of how you build value with your customer capital. And I would say marketing. Marketing is something everybody should be doing every day. That's how you get customers
Mhm.
into the door. But I think branding is the next level. Is like how do you build long-term value with your customer? And it's a win-win relationship. It's not just extracting,
True.
it's like provide value to them. They want with a good brand, it shows that people have confidence in your company, and
Confidence.
that's what. So, working with experts like Alicia and myself, we can help you build value. And I guess I'll let you end and talk about what you feel about brand and value.
Yeah, something that I saw in your white paper that kind of excited me that I don't think we touched on yet that I wanted to slip in there
Yeah.
was you mentioned that branding helps you be risk averse. Like it helps your company be resilient to
Yes.
changes in the marketplace, to a new competitor entering, to somebody else suddenly becoming cost competitive. If you have like customer loyalty and if you have like a bonded relationship with your audience, it's more like you're more resilient to those outside influences, which I think is
Yeah.
really interesting.
And maybe yes, let me add this. Just talk about this is going to get a little bit more technical. So I said branding goes beyond just the websites and the catchy headlines and stuff. There's also actual database and strategy. So for example, you could just have a great brand and tagline, great food like the sushi restaurant, and people might say like, yes, we know, let's call it Sushi X Rabata or something like that, that they make the best sushi. So maybe they expand from Manhattan Beach to Miami to New York. That's great. And maybe that brand is in people's mind, but you can also do certain things. So maybe you can have a CRM, the people that come into your restaurant, maybe you send them like a curated artisan book of sushi and stuff. I mean, that's expensive, but that could be one idea. And you
Yeah.
have that mailing list, and maybe you send it to them. Maybe if you're really trying to attract celebrities, CEOs, you send it to them like artisan type once a year. Like this is one thing about sushi, maybe how to make sushi. So you can have that engagement with people. And if you have that kind of strategy, even if the hottest, newest sushi restaurant comes, people are going to stay with you, or if the fads change. So
Mhm.
you have to have intentional strategies of engaging with your customers. And I said, now where the structural capital, like, do you have a CRM? Do you know your customers? Do you have information on their psychographics and demographics and who to target? I don't know if you did part of this work for the restaurant, but anybody that knows LA is like, hey, Manhattan Beach, um, Santa Monica, OC, Laguna Beach is a place to
It's
put,
affluent. Yeah.
yeah, restaurants. You don't want to put them in mid city, which is also affluent, but
Right.
they're
But it's
different
different.
ways.
Nobody wants to go there.
Like you can have steak houses and stuff. Like they have a lot of business steak houses for business type people in
Yeah.
mid city of
I did
LA. But
branding
this,
for Mastro's too, Mastro's
yeah,
Steakhouse.
yeah, but the sushi restaurants and stuff are by the ocean. I'm not sure why that is. The connect, I guess tuna, I guess fish and the
Maybe.
ocean.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it's hot and then there's fish and you're like smells like this ocean. I don't know,
yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a reason, but yeah, all the great sushi restaurants in LA are by the ocean.
Could
But
possibly
yes,
maybe there's more money there too. Santa
true.
Monica and stuff like that.
But yeah, so you have to be intentional and you should have a plan. And I said, if you don't figure out yourself, connect with your trusted advisors and let them come up with a plan and help you build value in your company.
Yes. Yes. Speaking of trusted advisors, before we wrap up, why don't you tell the people who are listening, like what kind of companies you work with, how they can engage with you, how they can find you in case they want to hire you as an advisor?
Thank you very much. So I work with, I'll say, small and medium sized and lower middle market companies, anywhere from 500,000 to like 25 million in revenue. The key thing is, do you have, I know being an owner, I mean, we're both business owners ourselves, it's tough. And to get to the next level, there's so many things you have to do. And I think in the current marketplace, you have to be lean. Now, you could go hire a bunch of MBAs, you could go hire a branding and executive and stuff, but not everybody has the budget and
Mm,
not everybody has this resources for that. So I work with business owners, more the creative type and not the CEO MBA type, people who started their companies. And I help them implement strategies to build value, sustainable value in their company. I work with advisors like yourself
mm,
to help them implement value, policies that build value so that if they decide to sell their company, let's say 5, 10, 15 years from now, they have a better chance. Or and um, that's relating to branding. Now, some other things is if they're just trying to, let's say, they want to pass it on to their kids, they want to have a succession plan. That's a whole different
mm,
strategy. But looking at your leadership team, your policies. So I work with business owners to build value in their company and plan for an exit. I especially like working with creative types. I bring strong analytical, and I do understand creative
you
energy a
do.
little bit. I
Yeah.
said I'm not going to try to be your branding person. I can give you advice, but I will point you to people like Alicia to help you. But I definitely understand how to bring together various aspects of business together in a cohesive manner. I said if you were a CPA now, I could be talking about income statements, taxes, and
No, please
depreciation. But
don't. Please don't.
but yes, I think people should just consider like the biggest, I think one differentiation is most people focus on I kind of like as Steve Jobs said, the focus on the features, like get your financial, but they don't really look at the intangibles, how the benefits, like how does everything come together. And I do it in a personalized and engaged manner. So if you're a business owner thinking about the future of your company, how to build value, reach out to me.
Love it. Okay, I'm gonna make sure that we have your contact information like with the video and stuff. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I think that we came up with some nuggets that are going to be helpful for people and
Yes, and I
helpful to
said
think about.
we'll follow up with a white paper. So thank you very much for having me on your
My
show, Alice.
pleasure. Yeah, okay. Have a great weekend, the rest of the day.
Okay.
Catch you later. Bye.